politics, and today we analyze an interesting trend between the Bank of Ghana's monetary policy rate and the outcome of presidential elections in Ghana. Lead data and research analyst here, Joy News, joins me in studio with details. And Kofi, in the business space, we know the policy rate as a key determinant of the cost of borrowing and checking inflation. But a careful observation of the trend, which you're going to see very soon, since 2002 tells a different story about the outcome of political elections and how they are linked with the performance of the monetary policy rate. Tell us about that.
Well, so first of all, we need to issue this disclaimer that we are not trying to predict
the
2024 election.
But 2024 election.
Absolutely, when data is telling an interesting story, it is important to also look at it. So we've seen a very interesting trend in terms of the relationship between the monetary policy rate movement and outcome of election. So I'm going to play that for you to see the movement from 2002 and how we've come so far. So this is the monetary policy rate right from 2002, and you see cyclical movement there. We're going to allow the animation to complete. Then we'll tell you the stories that the different peaks or the maximum points you see in this animation, how it relates with our presidential election. So it is done. Currently, the rate is 29%. Now, why is this important? The monetary policy rate is what we use to check inflation. It determines the amount of money that should be in the system, and then also determines the cost of borrowing. Because if the monetary policy rate is around 29%, it simply means that if you go to the commercial banks to borrow, the interest rate will surely be above 29% because banks will be adding their own margins. But beyond this financial and economic functions of the monetary policy rate, when you come to Ghana, there is an interesting story that the monetary policy rate tells, and that is how it is able to sort of paint a picture of how the presidential election actually pans out. Now, let's start from 2000. Unfortunately, we do not have data for 2000, but before this peak, there was another localized peak in 2000. And what did we see? When we saw that peak in 2000, we saw for the first time in the Fourth Republic that power switched from the NDC to the NPP. So that was the first peak. Now, Kufuor takes over in 2000. He stabilizes the economy a bit. I mean, good monetary policy rate down till we came to 2008. Then we see our second peak. So this is our first peak. This is the second peak before Kufuor left. What happens?
And they're doing so well.
They were doing so well. I mean,
we saw another peak.
Yeah. So just look at it. It went below, somewhere 14, even 12% before it started peaking around 18%. In 2008, we saw the peak. And there was an election in 2008. What happens? We've seen the second peak. What happens is that power again switches hands from the MPP now to the NDC. Now, the NDC comes to power in 2008. John Evans Atame was made, so rest in peace. Now, 2008, he came, 9, there was some sort of stability. We've seen the monetary policy rate coming down. That tells you that inflation was relatively stable within these periods.
Right.
Now, Mahama comes over in 2013. What happens? We see the monetary policy rate going up again.
So about 20%.
So about 20%. Let's see the movement again, so that it tells you the story proper for you to see the movements we are seeing in the monetary policy rate. So this is the first peak, the second peak. We are about to see the third peak in 2016.
Where they started around 13%, I think, and then it peaks.
Yeah, it peaks somewhere around,
25.
25, above 25. Now, what happens in 2016 is that there was an election. What happened again? So we've seen that whenever there are peaks and we have election, power switches hands. It happened again in 2016. 2020, I mean, President Kufuor had won in 2016. He had stabilized the economy a bit. Then we had our own problems after COVID.
Was that the lowest we had seen for a long time?
Yeah, so I think somewhere around 2020, when there was COVID, that was one of the lowest monetary policy rates we've ever seen. Let's see what the numbers are actually saying, and that will tell the story by its own self. We are not trying to predict the election, but we are only saying that,
So that's 13.5.
That was the lowest.
Wow.
Then after COVID, what are we seeing? We are seeing the same story. A decline, a peak, decline, a peak. Same one going into the 2024 election. Now, what happens is that the height of the peak also has a relationship with the margin of win. When you have a very low peak, it means that the election is sometimes, very compact. The competition is crazy, and sometimes even goes to a round of 2008. We saw a round of. If you compare this to this peak, you see that there's a vast difference between them. Now, 2016, see the height of the peak compared to this. I mean, in 2016, we saw that significant win by the NPP where they won more than 53%. And in 2024, we've seen this peak is the highest in the period under review. So we are not in any way trying to say that, I mean, this will mean that there'll be a change in power, but that's what the data is saying. It's an interesting trend that I think we have to look at. It's an interesting
trend. And you need to point out that, like we're pointing out, the monetary policy rate influences the cost of borrowing, also the interest on loans. And we've seen the business community raise concerns about access to loans and how difficult that is. And they form a critical mass, if you like, of the electors as well.
Yes, in fact, this tells the story of the economy proper than possibly any other, indicator, because it tells you that when it is high, it tells you that there's exchange rate problems. There will be no money in the system because the Monetary Policy Committee will be the Bank of Ghana will be trying to do mop-up exercise. It means that money supply will be restricted. It's also telling a different story that if you're a business person and you're going to the bank to borrow, you need to pay more on the interest and all of that. That also tells you that when it is so high, then it means that the treasury bill rate will also be high. And government comes into the same, liquidity space or capital space. It means government will get all the money private sector may not be able to get. So this tells a lot of stories about the economy, but not just the economy, but has another interesting relationship with the outcome of our presidential elections.
We know that the central bank usually increases the policy rate to check inflation, right? And so the question has also been what the government is doing on the fiscal side to curtail inflation so that we don't have to see the policy rate go up. And so just my final question, the two leading political candidates, what ideas are they presenting to check inflation?
I mean, inflation is important. It's on all of them, their radar. We've seen the NDC talking about the 24-hour economy, and they are saying that, I mean, if you allow the Bank of Ghana to come in most of the time, you create inflationary pressures. And so we've seen the NDC, they are not happy with what Bank of Ghana is doing in the space. We've seen they even took the finance minister to one committee to question him that he's caused financial loss to the state and all of that. And so the NDC, they've already gone to the Bank of Ghana. There was a petition and all of that.
Right.
So definitely they will be tackling that side. But the MPP believe that the current IMF program will be of help. And one of the targets of the IMF program is to help stabilize the economy. And when the economy starts to stabilize, you see the monetary policy rate will begin to come down again. That tells you that the pressure in terms of the inflation has eased a bit. The only way that we will see the monetary policy rate come down again to maybe 25 or even 16 is when we have inflation maybe as low as 10% or as low as maybe 11%. Other than that, it will be very, very difficult for us to see these troughs again, possibly in 2025. So it all depends on what how the IMF program will perform, under the period under review.
This is interesting stuff. And we didn't just predict the elections, the outcome of the 2024 elections. We just showed you data and tried to make sense of it as in relation with presidential election results. Thank you so much.
Election is won at the polling station, not here.
Thank you so much. Isaac Ofeje, lead data and research analyst with Joy News. Thank you so much for bringing us this. It was insightful.